Hi, this is Maria Williams. Today I'm making a fun bright card using Pretty Pink Posh's Pinata Party stamps and dies and some Distress Oxide inks. Last month, Pretty Pink Posh did a new release, and I did something that I've never done before, which was to buy their entire release. I thought the products were so cute and versatile that I just had to have them all. The release is on sale right now, and you get several stamp sets with coordinating dies, some dies that don't have coordinating stamp sets, and a couple of the dies are specifically designed to make shaker cards. And in this release you also get some jewel and confetti mixes that you can use to fill your shaker cards or to add some extra detail to your cards. For today's card, I have chosen 4 colors of Distress Oxide inks: Twisted Citron, Picked Raspberry, Carved Pumpkin, and Peacock Feathers. And I'm going to use the Pinata Party stamps and coordinating dies. These are so cute. And then I'm also going to use Stampin' Up's Layering Circles Frameless dies to cut the circle around the pinata. I also have some cardstock here, and I'm going to be using for the panel Bristol Smooth White because I'm going to ink it, and that gives me the best ink blend. But for my card base, I'm using Nina Solar White 110 pound, which is a nice heavy cardstock, but the ink will dry faster on it, so that when I stamp my sentiment and all that, I won't have any issues with it taking too long to dry like I would on the Bristol. Plus, the Nina Solar White cardstock is a brighter white, and I like it better. The first thing I'm going to do is ink up my panel using Twisted Citron and Picked Raspberry. These are 2 of my favorite colors along with Peacock Feathers, and I'm using a craft mat to keep my work surface clean. I'm using a pretty good amount of ink to get a nice smooth blend, especially where the 2 colors meet. Once I'm done, I'm going to set this aside to dry, and notice that to keep my fingers clean, I did use a little bit of post-it tape on my fingers. That way I don't get any smudges on the cardstock either. When you're trying to blend 2 colors together, it's a good idea to go back and forth between the colors. So I put down the Picked Raspberry, then I put down the Twisted Citron, and then I went back to the Picked Raspberry and inked up some more, and then picked up my inking tool with the with the Twisted Citron one more time and blended through the middle again. The inks take a little while to dry, so you can easily go back and forth and keep blending until you're happy with your panel. While my panel is drying, I'm going to start on the banner pieces. There's an outline stamp and a solid stamp for banners in the stamp set, and I decided to go with just a solid stamp. I'm using my favorite method of stamping and die cutting multiples, which is to stamp the image once and die cut it, and then use is that the negative? Well, the cardstock that is surrounding the part that I cut out as my template. So then I'm taking 2 strips of Nina 80 pound Solar White cardstock, stacking them and putting the die on top of it, running all of this through my Sidekick and getting 2 banner pieces at a time, and then I will take the banner pieces, put them into my template, and stamp them in the 3 different colors. I stamped 2 in each one of the colors, making sure to clean my stamp really well in between the different ink colors. This is the kind of project where I feel like the MISTI is such an invaluable tool. It allows you to very quickly stamp all these pieces, where if you didn't have it, you would have to either die cut each piece individually or die cut them all and then stamp them by eyeballing, and there's so much more room for error. And also, if you didn't get a good first impression the first time you stamped it, you can just ink up your stamp again and restamp, whereas it would be extremely hard, if not impossible, to do that without the MISTI. Next, I'm moving on to the pinata itself. I'm using, again, Nina 80 pound cardstock and the VersaFine Black Onyx ink. It gives a really nice crisp look, and whenever I'm die cutting and coloring, I like to do 2 images just in case I mess one up. I don't have to start over. So I'm stamping 2 of them, and I didn't pay attention to the size of my cardstock, and it was a little bit too wide to fit through my Sidekick, so I'm just trimming it down a little bit, securing my die on top of the stamped image and running it through my Sidekick. Post-it tape is my favorite tape to use right now to secure my dies to my cardstock, but I haven't tried that purple tape that a lot of designers are using. To color the piñata, I've selected 3 different Copic markers. You can see I had a little scratch piece of paper. I tried a few different colors and I settled on RV04, BG02, and YR14. You could of course select lighter colors if these are too bright, and you can use colored pencils or regular markers or whatever you would like. I'm not trying to do any shading at all. I'm just trying to color this in as quickly as I can while staying within the lines. And I'm coloring all the areas that are of one color at the same time. Rather than switching back and forth to do each one of the lines, I'm just coloring in all the orange, all the pink, all the blue. I chose not to color in the mane or the tail of the piñata, but I did a class with this card recently and one of the ladies colored it in the same colors and I thought it looked really good. Instead, I decided to use a Sakura Jelly Roll Stardust pen. This is like the original shimmer pen. It doesn't have a brush tip, it has a roller ball tip. It's kind of like the black and white Jelly Roll pens. The Sakura ones are my favorite ones. The shimmer you get with this pen is very similar to the Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen. I hope that you can see that on the video. At this point, I decided it would be a good idea to lay out all my elements and get the spacing right and to go ahead and stamp my greeting. I have chosen the Have a Festive Day sentiment for the outside of the card and then the Happy Birthday for the inside. I'm going to use my MISTI, so I've put all the elements in it, and then I'm also going to use a grid sheet to make sure that my sentiment is perfectly straight on the front of the card. Then I take out all the elements, ink up the stamp with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and simply close the door. Perfect impression, right? Except that I didn't measure the squares to the left and the right of my sentiment, so my sentiment is actually a little too far over to the right. No problem, I had cut my panel the same size as the front of the card, so what I'm going to do is trim a 1/4 inch from 2 sides and then it will fit perfectly in the middle of my card front. Or actually, what I did is I cut a 1/4 inch from the left side of the panel and then 1/8 of an inch from the top and the bottom, so that my circle would still fit perfectly on the bottom of the card. Next, I decided to work on my banner, and my twine that I planned on using was really kinked from being on a piece of cardstock. So I'm using this wax, I think it's a wax of circle, that sewers use for embroidery floss. And basically what you do is you stick your twine inside one of the grooves and then just pull it through, and it picks up a little bit of the wax and it makes your twine nice and pliable. It takes out all the wrinkles and it looks perfect. Now that I've told you how to get your twine perfect, I'm going to tell you that I don't think you really need to use it. I would skip this step if I made this card again because the twine ended up not being seen. So you could totally skip this step and just glue your banner pieces down. Actually, I set mine up with dimensionals. And if I hadn't been trying to attach the twine at the same time, I just would have put one large dimensional in the center of each one of my banner pieces and stuck them down. As it was, I was trying to catch the twine on some of the dimensionals that were on the back of my banner pieces, so I ended up cutting small pieces of these dimensionals, which are like foam tape, but pre-cut into hexagons, and placing them around the banner pieces instead. I continued attaching the banner pieces, and then I secured the twine to the back of my front panel with just some basic Scotch tape. Unfortunately, I ran out of storage in my camera shortly after this point, so I'm missing part of the assembly. But essentially what I did is I took this panel and placed it on my card front and carefully marked the circle onto the front of the card, and then took these small swirl stamps that come in the stamp set and just stamped them in that general area of the circle in 3 different colors. I felt like I needed to bring in the Twisted Citron a little bit more, so I stamped a few with that, a few with the carved pumpkin, and a few with the picked raspberry. Then I took a small piece of twine and used a piece of Scotch tape to attach the twine to the front of the card, and then trimmed it down, put a dimensional approximately where the piñata would be, and then attached the piñata. Then I just took a lot of foam tape and attached the inked panel onto the front of the card. For the inside of my card, I'm using the Pinata that looks like a cupcake, and I'm stamping it twice using Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I'm not sure why I switched. This is also a Copic friendly ink, so it'll work great when I go to color it. And then I'm just going to use the coordinating die and my Sizzix Sidekick to cut the cupcakes out. I'm using the same colors that I used on the outside of the card, so RV04, BG02, and YR14. I'm not sure why I didn't pick a green color to go with the Twisted Citron. But anyway, then I also used C3 to add a little bit of shading to the cupcake wrapper. The last bit of stamping left to do is to stamp the happy birthday on the inside of the card, and I switched back to VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I think I did use the Memento because it dries quicker and I was in a hurry to get my coloring done. And for the inside of the card on Nina, it was okay to use the VersaFine because it would dry pretty quickly. And then last but not least, I used some Tombow Monomulti glue to glue the Pinata cupcake into place on the inside of the card. Added a little bit more of that Sakura Stardust pen onto the cherry of the cupcake, and the card was done. And in hindsight, I wish I had drawn a line from the cupcake up to the top of the card so that it would look like the pinata was hanging. Well, that's it for today's card. Check out the Pretty Pink Posh website for all the products and their January release. For the products I used, I will have links on my blog. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks for joining me today. For links to the products I used and still shots, please visit my blog at mariascardsandmore.com.